Welcome to the Etihad Cargo Connections with 10 Furlong Magazine. I'm your host today, Aurelian Drumion. Today, we're excited to have Felix Francis, the expert behind gripping crime novels set in the thrilling world of horse racing. Join us as we dive into the plot of his latest book, explore his unique approach to combining authenticity with compelling fiction, and get a glimpse into his hopes for the future of the racing industry. Stay tuned for an intriguing conversation with a literary talent who continues to leave an incredible mark in the world of crime fiction. So great to have you here, Felix, first of all. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Aurelian. Thank you. It's not a very nice day here in England, but that doesn't worry me at the moment because I'm deep into my latest book. So my deadline is the end of March, well, 1st of April.
Oh, wow. So quite soon, actually.
So I'm well into the last third, but I haven't yet finished it. I'm still trying to work out what's going to happen.
Oh, wow. So exactly, could you tell us a little bit more about the plot, itself?
Well, the book is going to be called Syndicate, and it is about owning racehorses in syndicates. And it opens with my main character at the Derby, the Epsom Derby, where one of his syndicated horses is the favourite. And so he spends the morning in great nervousness. And then he spends the afternoon in ecstasy because the horse wins the race.
Oh, wow.
And he spends the evening in terror because someone is trying to, someone kidnaps his daughter and is trying to control the syndicates by threats of death and mayhem to his family. So it's a new area I've never used before, syndicate ownership. And I've had lots of help from various people, from Harry Herbert, who runs Highclere Thoroughbred Racing. And it seems to be going all right at the moment, but it all depends on how it ends. And of course, the end is the most important bit. So,
sure.
I've got another about 8 weeks to go. So just under 8 weeks now. So I've got
a little bit of pressure, I'm sure.
I'll be back hard at it after this interview today.
I can imagine. So you are kind of following, in your father's footsteps. What initially drew you to the racing industry, maybe as a setting, for your crime novels?
Well, it was partly because my father's literary agent had asked me to lunch, and he said, Felix, we've got a problem. All your father's books are going to go out of print. It's not that they're not good enough. It's just that my father had retired. There hadn't been a new book for 5 years, and people were forgetting. And more to the point, the people the buyers for the bookshops, I don't mean the public that go in and buy them, but the people who buy for the bookshops decide which books are going to go on their bookshelves. They're all that job is the first job you get when you join the company. So they're all people who are just coming out of university. They're all in their early 20s and so on, and they forgot. They didn't even know about Dick Francis. So the agent said, they're going to go out of print. He said, what we need is a new hardback. Well, I looked at him and I thought he must be crazy because my father at this stage was 85 years old.
Sure.
My mother and father worked on them together, the worst kept secret in publishing. And my mother had died 5 years previously. And I said, well, you're not going to get one. And he said, I'm actually asking your permission to ask an existing crime writer to write a new Dick Francis story. Well, I must have had a little bit of wine by that stage because I said, well, before you ask anyone else, I would like to have a go. And to his eternal credit, the agent didn't roll his eyes or laugh. He just said, I'll give you 2 months to write 2 chapters and then we'll see. And I went home and I wrote the chapters. I sent them in to him. We had another lunch and he said, well, there's 2 things you've got to do, Felix. One, you better get on and finish it. And secondly, you better go and talk to your father. So actually following my father's footsteps was literal, because I actually wrote, well, I wasn't allowed to say so for many, many years, but I can now. The last book that came out with Dick Francis, as a Dick Francis novel, I actually wrote it. So
Wow.
the choice of following my father's footsteps was absolutely the case. I did. I followed it absolutely. I chose a book. I chose to write a book with Sid Halley in it, and Sid Halley had been in 3 previous books, so it was using an existing character, and I was terrified actually, because even though I knew it was not bad, and I had a sort of committee of my father's publisher and editor and agent to check that it was all right. But I was afraid that when the book came out, all the reviews on the following Sunday in the Sunday newspapers would all say Dick has lost it, but they didn't. They all said the master is back.
Wow.
And the book went to the top of the bestseller list. Well, of course it did. It had Dick Francis on the cover.
Oh, yes, yes.
But it was the reviews I found it particularly pleasing.
I'm sure.
And the publisher said, well, we want another one. So I started work on the next book, which was called Dead Heat. And as far as I was concerned, it was going to be exactly the same, to come out as a Dick Francis novel. But the American publishers took fright and said, we've got to have your name on the front. So it had Dick Francis in huge letters across the front, and underneath in the smallest font they could find, and Felix Francis. And over the years, my name's got bigger, but it still has a Dick Francis novel on the front of the cover of the book. So
it's like a branding almost.
That's my choice. That's my choice.
Okay, that's your
choice. I feel it's. I think Dick Francis is now a brand,
exactly,
rather than an individual.
True.
So I literally did follow in my father's footsteps.
Wow.
And I spent my life on going around race courses with him when I was a child. I'd also been a member at Cheltenham for race course for many years, and I've been racing all over the world. I've been racing. I've even been to racing in Canada, in Woodbine, and I've been racing in. I went racing in Vancouver, but I can't remember the name of the racecourse. And I've been racing in Dubai. Been twice, once to the old racecourse and once to Meydan. I've been to 3 Melbourne Cups. I've raced in Japan. I even went racing in Sharjah when I was staying out there for the Sharjah Book Fair. So I've been racing pretty much everywhere in the world, South Africa, and so it seemed obvious to me. I mean, there was no question that I was literally following in my father's footsteps. In fact, I wrote the last of the Dick Francis novels myself, so I was being Dick Francis. So that's why racing is there, and I'm still writing. The Syndicate is now my 18th book, and they've all had horses in there somewhere, but they're not about horses. My books are about people, not about the horses. I mean, they have horses there, but it's the interaction between the people. It's racing is simply the canvas against which I paint the human story, and it's a great canvas because it's very exciting. There's very high value. There's lots of cash floating around. It's very competitive. Everyone is trying to get an edge by fair means or foul. Mostly by foul means in my books, but everyone is trying to win, and so it's a great I think it's a great background to be able to set a mystery in against. Yeah,
Definitely. What a great way to start a career. I guess a new career maybe as a writer. That sounds
yes. Well, I've had a number of careers in my life. I was a schoolmaster.
Mhm.
I taught advanced level physics for 17 years, and then I left that and became a businessman and ran a company called World Challenge Expeditions Limited. I was deputy chairman of that, and we ran expeditions for young people all over the world. And then when that company was sold, I became an author, and I didn't start. My first book was published when I was 53. So here we are, 18 years later, and I'm now 71.
Which
Well,
is
I will
great.
I will be on Saturday.
Always a change of career anytime. That's great. It's very good.
Yes, and I have no. I don't really think I have plans to retire.
Mhm.
Um, I might slow down a bit and enjoy life a bit more because it's hard work writing. My wife was always complaining that she loses me for months on end because I'm living in a parallel universe. In other words, I'm living in the book as
Already.
opposed
Uh-huh.
to in reality.
Sure.
Um, and it never leaves me. I mean, I wake up in the night like I did last night. Woke up 2:30, was awake for half an hour, and you're just thinking about the book, and
It's
it never
always
leaves you. It's
always not.
always
Yeah, it's always there. That's
there. And people say, "Do you enjoy writing?" I do, but I enjoy it more when it's finished. And it's a you know it's a satisfaction. My father always was asked, did he prefer the writing a book or riding a horse in a race? I mean, I've never ridden horses in races, but he was a champion steeplechase jockey, and he always said that when you won a race, the adulation was instant, but it was very short-lived. You know, half an hour later, you could go out to the next race and have a crashing fall and end up in hospital. It was short-term. He said that when you write a book, the happiness about it, the satisfaction is more long-lasting.
Mhm.
And yeah, when I send the book into the publishers, I always have 2 weeks where I don't hear anything, and it's the most difficult 2 weeks of my year. And if they come back as they have done every time, saying it was great and wonderful, then the satisfaction begins.
Sure.
But it's it's your whole year's work.
Mhm.
It's a whole year's work in one thing, and it's so it is like putting all your eggs in one basket, and you
Definitely.
just hope you don't drop it.
Very true. So, Felix, let's get a little bit onto the research itself for writing books. How do you balance, this authenticity of the racing world while also, creating compelling fictional narratives? Do you rely on
Yeah,
extensive research, or how do you
yes,
do
I
it?
do. I do a lot of research. Uh, I do write stories. I
Mhm.
mean, I write fiction. I'm in the entertainment business, and in racing, some of the things I write about what the skullduggery going on in racing um, is expanded. There's a grain of truth in everything, but I just sort of expand it into and I never do down racing because I'm very fond of it. But you've got to get the racing right. You've got to get you've got to get it for nothing worse for racing people than to find out that read a book where there's obvious mistakes. So even though I've got to get the racing right, I use real places, I use real race courses, I use real race
Excellent.
names, and I make sure that I make sure that I don't run a 2-year-old in a 2-mile race and this sort of thing, because that cannot happen. I make sure that I have one of my Bibles is the British Flat Pattern and Listed Races book, which has all the conditions of every race in it. So I make sure that I get everything right.
Sure, that's very important.
And then I send the book. I sent the manuscript to my brother, who is involved in horse racing. He was a racehorse trainer. He was a jockey. He was an amateur jockey and a trainer, and he runs a racehorse transport business. And he's forgotten more about racing than I've ever known. So I send it to him, and he will put me right if I've made some mistakes. Not that I don't make mistakes. I have made a mistake. In one book, I wrote that a young, inexperienced jockey had a £7 allowance in the Grand National. Well, I know now that you can't claim your allowance if you're riding in the Grand National. So I do make mistakes, and people write and tell me.
Okay.
I mean, you'd be surprised. It's not just the racing.
Sure.
I once wrote a book called Bloodline, and I had a character who drove an Audi TT car, and they were angry, and I wanted to express this anger in words, so they drove off without a second glance back, spinning the rear wheels on the gravel of the car park. Well, 2 people wrote to me and said, "You can't spin the rear wheels on an Audi TT, it's front wheel drive." and what are you going to do about it? And I mean, initially the person had actually had a Porsche car, which is rear wheel drive. But I wanted someone else later in the book to have a Porsche, so I changed the first one to an Audi TT. But it is incredible that people can go to the extent of writing to you because you've made a mistake.
True.
But fortunately, they're very rare. So I do my best to ensure that certainly the racing, the authenticity of the racing, I do a lot of research, and I go to race courses. I mean, I wrote at the last a book a couple of books ago. I set up in the north of England, and I hadn't. The setting was up in Midland in Yorkshire, and I hadn't been to some of the race meetings, the race courses up there. So I went to them so that I would get it right, because there's nothing more off-putting than someone with it wrong. I mean, there is the famous film My Fair Lady, which has racing at Royal Ascot, and someone didn't do their research properly in that, because the horses go the wrong way past the grandstand, because they go the American way, and no one had bothered to realize that Ascot they go the other way. So there are, I mean, and so things are there are always things wrong in films and books, but I do my best to ensure that they're very few and far between. I won't say I don't make mistakes, because I do, but I do a lot of research.
Okay, fair enough. That's great. Let's talk, Felix, a little bit about your characters. How do you see them as archetypes within the racing world? Or do you strive to maybe portray unique individuals facing complex challenges? You mentioned it's all about people, so...
Yes. Well, I think I do both of those things.
Okay.
They are unique individuals. And yes, I do tend to try and put them into complex situations, to put them under stress, because that's when that's what makes something exciting.
Sure.
But I also think that they're not so individual that there could not, but people can say, well, that's ridiculous because there aren't people like that on a racecourse. They are, so they're an amalgam of different people. I mean, some people say to me, "Oh, I know I can sell so and so." That's me, they say, and I think,
Oh,
well,
wow, interesting.
maybe they're right, but actually, the person is. I mean, we all know that. I mean, the racing is wonderful insofar that it has everyone goes racing in this country, certainly from royalty right down to the man in the street going to the, is interested in racing, goes into his local betting shop. There's such a wide group of people, and every socioeconomic grouping goes to the races or is interested in horses. And so it's a wonderful that there are so many different characters. And I mean, generally, I don't have, my characters are not Superman. They're not superhuman. They don't solve the mysteries by extra sensory perception or anything. They are regular people.
Okay.
And they're regular people thrust into an irregular position. And I mean, they're not, most of them are not professional investigators. They just have to investigate something because someone is threatening them, or they are thrown into a situation, and they're normal people. They're not Superman. They're not James Bond. They're more man in the street who finds himself in a crisis situation. So they could be a lot of people, but yeah, I don't know. All my main characters are really me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're me. I mean, I write in the first person narrative. They're either me or they are what I would like to be.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of them are, fit, able, slim, 30-year-olds, and it's what I would like to be. Yeah, they think as I do, so I put myself in that position. Other characters, the crooks and so on, they could be anybody. But yeah, you'll see my characters on the race course. Then I think, of course you will.
They are the yeah, they are taken from the reality of the world, I guess, and turned into characters.
Exactly.
Excellent. So you did mention the story about the Audi TT, which was really interesting. Have you received any other unexpected feedbacks?
I got one day I had the best feedback I could ever imagine.
Oh, wow.
I went to a cricket match at Windsor by Windsor Castle, and it was the royal household against a club that I'm a member of called the Saints and Sinners Club of London. And Queen Elizabeth II, this was a few years ago, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, they came down to meet everybody. And we were all in a long lineup. And I was standing there. I had met the Queen. I met the Queen quite a few times. I was quite relaxed about it, but there was a man coming along and he was introducing, people. And it was quite a star-studded lineup. And when he got to me, he said, "Ma'am, can I introduce Felix Francis? He's an author." And the Queen turned to and look at the man who'd introduced me, and she said, "I know, I've read them all."
Oh, wow.
So that was, I mean, I used to send a copy to her. I mean, I gave a copy to her
Kind.
every year. I used to go to Buckingham Palace to hand over the book. So I knew and she often told me that she read them, but this was particularly wonderful that she turned to this man, and in the hearing of quite a lot of people around me, she said, "I know, I've read them all," and it was just a magic moment. I wouldn't have repeated that, but I think I can now. But that was a wonderful feedback, and anyone who says they don't read reviews is lying, because of course you read reviews, not necessarily those on Amazon, but some of the ones in newspapers. Well, of course, everyone wants to know whether people like their work. So the feedback there is interesting. I've had, I would say, predominantly positive feedback always, and certainly I've had positive feedback from those involved in horse racing. You know, the authorities, the chairman of a past chairman of the British Horse Racing Authority always used to love reading my books. My problem there was that if I had found a loophole, which I used in my story, the next thing would be that the loophole would be closed by the authority, because I knew that the chairman had read the book, and then the whatever I was doing was then the rules would change. So anyway, so that's quite satisfying, I suppose.
Of course.
That you've got it right. You struck a nerve, you know. So, but the best feedback is, you know, people coming up to you and saying how much they enjoyed the book. I mean, people come up to me sometimes. I remember a woman came up to me and said, "I've got a bone to pick with you." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "You kept me up all night. I couldn't go to sleep until I'd finished the book." And I mean, it's what every author loves to hear. But on the other hand, you think to yourself, "Blimey, she read it in one night. It took me a whole year to write that."
It's true. That's true, actually.
But of course, you enjoy those sort of feedbacks. Are great, and I've had very little negative feedback. So that's a few people said at the beginning that I was simply riding on my father's name. But I think now, after 17 bestsellers of my own, that I can hold my head up and say that I'm giving my father an extended immortality, really. I mean, he's been dead now for 14 years, so, but still his name is there, and I'm very happy with that. And so I did get a little bit of negative feedback, especially from some members of the family who thought it was inappropriate.
Oh, wow.
But they didn't realize that I'd actually written the last of the Dick Francis books at that stage. So I feel that, yeah, feedback is great. Any sort of feedback is great,
For sure.
because it means that people are reading them.
That's true. That's true. So, Felix, let's talk a little bit about the challenges and rewards. You did mention a few rewards, you know, whenever you're waiting for your publisher, I guess, to approve probably the book. So what are some of the biggest challenges or rewards in writing crime fiction, you know, specifically tied to that world, the racing world?
Now, that's a difficult question to answer, because, I mean, the rewards are multiple ways. I mean, I get paid to do it for a start. The books sell. So that's allows me to, you know, live a life which I enjoy.
Sure.
The rewards of people telling you that the book is, you know, they've really enjoyed it, that they've immersed themselves in it. is wonderful. But and the challenges, well, the challenges is that it's hard work writing 90,000 words, and also you've got to think of a new story every year. I mean, my father wrote 39 books, 39 mysteries. I nearly finished number 18. So that's 57. So you've got 57 stories you can't use again.
That's true.
So it is increasingly more and more difficult to think up a storyline. So that is a major challenge. I mean, there might come a time when I don't write about horse racing. And if that's the case, it would be because I couldn't think of a story to do with horse racing. But actually, there are an infinite number of stories because the stories are based on, they are involve greed, revenge, their envy, all the usual. You might say many of the seven deadly sins are can be put into a book. It could be about any other sport or not a sport at all. It could. So the challenge is to come up with a believable plot and to put it in a character who is also believable and is put into stressful situations to try and solve it.
Sure.
I mean, the biggest challenge is actually writing it. No, actually, I think that's not right. The biggest challenge is thinking up the story. Once you've thought up the story, writing it is fairly straightforward. I've now done, I'm on my 18th book. I know how to do the writing. The process is something which I worked very hard at to start with, but now it comes more naturally. But it is still thinking up the story is the major challenge.
Finding the plot, I'm sure, especially when you have, more than 50 books already written around a specific story, definitely.
Yeah, it is difficult.
So you did mention, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was just about to say you did mention some of my next question, which is, do you see yourself venturing outside of the racing genre, in the future? Or do you think it's more of a permanent source of inspiration, as long as you can come up with stories around it?
I think that they've all, I mean, I wrote a book called Guilty, Not Guilty a few years ago, and it had very little racing in it at all. I mean, it actually started on a race course, and my character was a steward, but actually it had almost no racing in it. I had to find a bit of racing to put in it.
Okay.
Because my publisher they like that. They like the racing. And my readers know what they're going to, they also enjoy that. You don't need to know anything about horses or racing in order to read the book. It helps if you know which end of a horse eats and which end doesn't. But apart from that, you might learn something, but you don't need to know anything. But I don't know. I'll never say never. And in fact, Guilty Not Guilty was one that had almost no racing in it at all. And I might do another one similar to that. But as I say, the books are not about the horses, they're about the people.
That's true. So as a writer and a fan of the sport, of course, what are your hopes for the future of the racing industry, both in terms, of its integrity and its cultural impact?
Well, I am a great fan of horse racing. I'm not a great gambler. I don't like losing. But I do love watching horses race. And my hopes for the future is that it continues pretty much the same as it is now, really. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who attack horse racing, but I think a lot of them are misguided. I mean, the horses are so well treated. They're treated a lot better than the human beings around them. They live a life of luxury, really, but they do have to run fast. I think that racing is increasingly in this country, in the United Kingdom, racing is increasingly a young people's sport. You go to the races, there's lots of young people there, and I think that is partly because they understand that the racing has got high levels of integrity. It's very it has an authority that regulates it very tightly. I mean, racing is not it doesn't worry about people's feelings. It worries about the integrity of the sport. And if people don't think that the sport is being fairly run, then they're not prepared to gamble on it. They're not prepared to attend it. And I think that racing it's a lot straighter in reality than it is in my books. Let me put it that way. So I like to think that racing will continue with its strive to be fair and honest, and I mean it's the bedrock of the sport is the honesty and integrity. I mean, there will always be people who are trying to beat the system, but overall, I think everyone has a story about someone that beat the bookies. Well, that's all they are, stories. They're not reality, not really. I mean, I dare say there are things going on we don't know about, but the idea of the future of horse racing. I mean, I think that I'm worried a little bit about the animal rights people,
Sure.
who I don't think understand how well looked after and how loved race horses are, and they seem to think that they should all just be standing in a field eating grass. Well, they wouldn't exist for that if that was the case. And also, horses they're herd animals. They like running together, and they're always and they like to race. They like to get their head in front. They are that it is in their DNA to be to run fast and to try and be ahead. And all horse racing does is it channels that into an organization. It is the second largest spectator sport in this country after soccer, after football.
Wow.
And anyway, I what do I say? My hopes the future is that it continues pretty much as it is. I think we do a great job. Perhaps there's it is every day of the year. There are just 3 days in the year there aren't race meetings in this country, and that's Christmas Day and the 2 days before Christmas. So it is big business. It's a huge industry, employs very large numbers of people, and gives an awful lot of enjoyment and escapism to an awful lot of people. Go racing on a Saturday afternoon, having had a pretty dreary week in a factory, and it's entertainment, but it is big business too.
Very true. So you're not afraid that the young generation is going to lose interest in this industry with technology, and
well, it isn't the case at the moment. There's an awful lot of young people go racing in this country, and I would say that increasingly more young people than I ever remember going racing. I mean, you go to, I mean, there are just, it is an exciting activity.
For sure.
And
And a gathering,
exciting,
like a
I
family gathering.
mean, and
Meeting people.
certainly gambling on horses is very much a part of life in this country,
Sure.
and it adds a bit of excitement. And I realize that you don't want to gamble your life away, or all your money away, but having a few pounds on a horse give you something to shout about,
Sure.
and that's what it is. I mean, you probably will end up not winning money off the bookmakers or whatever. But on the other hand, if you get one winner, it makes you feel good. It's you can shout and cheer and cheer the horse home, so it's all about winning. Yeah, it's all about winning.
Very well.
It's an exciting activity. That's the important thing.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
If you could create a dream situation for an international race for one of your characters, which race would it be then?
Now, that is a difficult question. I mean, the race, I think one of the greatest races in the world is the Melbourne Cup. It's a 2-mile handicap. It is called the race that stops the nation.
Wow.
It's held on a Tuesday, and it literally does stop the nation. I mean, in Melbourne and Victoria, the state of Victoria, it is a national holiday, but everywhere else in Australia, they're all glued to their televisions to watch the Melbourne Cup. It's worth an incredible amount of money to the winner. It's not so much but I mean, obviously that's nice, but it's the winning that's important. I mean, the Kentucky Derby I've been to a number of times. That is a very important race, and it has a wonderful whole week of build up towards it. The Epsom Derby, the Dubai World Cup is, and there are some great races around the world. I mean, I spent some time a few years ago. I went to watch white turf, and white turf is where they race on the top of the frozen lake at St. Moritz on the ice. I mean, the ice is all broken up, and the horses wear special shoes with studs in them.
Wow.
And it is proper horse racing. I mean, it's full on horse racing, and the prize money is great. Horses go out from this country to race there as well. Starting stalls and everything, just like a race course built on the ice. And that was really exciting. I loved that. It's a bit of, there's a bit of haute couture. Everyone all is glamorous, drinking, fur hats and fur coats, drinking champagne.
Sure.
And there's cordon bleu, hospitality, and it is just spectacular. And so I've used that in a book already. I've used the Derby in a book already. I've even used the Kentucky Derby in a race. Well, I don't know that I've used it. I can't remember whether I actually did the Kentucky Derby or whether it was the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes. But so I've used those big races already. I haven't used the Melbourne Cup yet, even though my father did. So perhaps I ought to think of a new international race. I haven't used the Dubai World Cup at Meydan. I have been to Meydan, but I've never been to a Dubai World Cup.
Fair enough. Maybe that's the future, the Middle Eastern horse races.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the Middle East, they love racing, don't they? I mean, they don't just race horses, they race camels. And I've even been to a camel race. So that was in the days when they used to have little boys on the back, but nowadays they have robots. So it's race. Yeah, it's the thrill of the race, isn't it?
Sure.
And so I'm writing quite a lot of the book I'm writing at the moment. It takes place at Royal Ascot, and Royal Ascot races are, the racing at Royal Ascot is incredible. And not just the glamour of the royal enclosure and the royal procession and all that. The races are spectacular at Royal Ascot, and they're all high quality races. And it's a what can I say? An international race. I mean, I think the Melbourne Cup is the one that I find the most intriguing. It's a handicap for a start. So, and horses go from all over the world to race there. Horses from this country, horses from Ireland and America. It is, as I said, it's the race that stops the nation. So that's what they call it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Felix, for this interview. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did very much. Thank you.
That was excellent.
I'm now going to get back to the writing.
Yes, I'll let you get back to the writing. Very important as well.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your morning and afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go to bed now.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.